Hello. I'd like to extend to you an invitation to enroll in international law, a course that I will be teaching in the spring to 2021. This course is an elective for first year law students that will focus on basic issues of public international law, general public international law, as well as in some specific topical areas. The course will start with a general overview of sources of international law. In other words, by the end of the course, you should understand what counts as international law and when and why. This issue is interesting because there is no international lawmaking body. There are no international legislatures like there are in domestic systems or even in the supranational systems like the European Union. So, what counts as international law is always subject to inquiry and to debate. Moreover, there's also the issue of hierarchy among the different sources of international law. Are some sources of international law more important than others? Are there hierarchies or pyramids of some sort? What about the resolutions of the United Nations Security Council, for example? Are they more important than a bilateral treaty between two countries? What about certain rules that we believe are so fundamental to humanity that they cannot be violated, like the prohibition against torture or slavery? Can countries decide that they're not bound by such rules? What happens with torture, for example, in a situation like Abu Ghraib or Guantanamo? Is waterboarding, for example, considered torture? And what happens with the Johnny U memos? In this course, we will also study the subjects of international law. We will look at the more traditional ones like state and international organizations, but we will also study the international status of other actors, such as individuals, NGOs, and corporations. Another topic that we will cover is the notion of sovereignty. Sovereignty immutable? Is it the same as it was, say, in the middle of the 20th century? And what about the practice of colonialism and the practice of imperialism? Are these issues anathema to the current notions of national sovereignty? Or is there a way to reconcile them legally through international law? Are human rights a limit to national sovereignty? We will also study the use of force and international security, as well as the peaceful resolution of disputes. We will look at what is going on in the trade wars between the US and China, and whether the US is acting lawfully in restricting commerce with China unilaterally. Is China acting lawfully? And what can the US do about it? Moreover, what is going on right now in the South China Sea? Is this a breach of international law? And if so, is China responsible for such breach? Topics such as these we will study when we look at the responsibility of the states for delict or wrongful acts. And as time permits, we will also look at other topics of international law, like the environment and natural resources, or the law of the sea, human rights, the laws of war, international humanitarian law, international crimes and criminal law. Now, as for the style of the class, it will be participatory. We will use both a treatise, which is basically a systematic analysis of the relevant bodies of law, and a casebook, in which we will analyze both judicial opinions and other relevant documents. The treatise will provide you with a necessary structure to understand the basic concepts, ideas, and general rules that are the bulwark of public international law, as well as certain topical areas, like the law of the sea, international environmental law, for example, whereas the casebook, on the other hand, will help you flesh out some of these concepts and gain a deeper understanding of them. Gain a deeper understanding of the concepts, principles, standards, rules, and exceptions in this body of law. Students should come to class having read the materials for the class and being prepared to present the cases or the topics um, in both the casebook and materials and in the treaties. Now, as for the method of evaluation for the class, I will be evaluating both class participation and a written final exam, which will be comprised of a case hypothetical, short answers, and multiple choice questions. It will be an open book exam. Now, my interest in this topic is basically, or regards basically, the domestic application of international law. You see, not only international courts apply international law, domestic courts can also apply international law, subject to certain conditions, depending on the country, of course, although some courts have been very reticent to do so. My own research revolves around the interplay between international law and comparative constitutional law, and more specifically, about how different domestic actors use international law as a tool to foster significant social change. Um, International law is involved in almost any type of economic, social, or political interactions across borders, from international trade to banking, taxation, and so on. But international law also reaches within many domestic social interactions as well. International law is involved, for example, in the protection of human rights, in determining the minimum standards that states need to abide by when protecting due process, and even in issues regarding the death penalty. It is also involved in trade and the protection of intellectual property. So it affects the kinds of products that we consume and even the movies that we watch. Of course, the protection of our computers and networks. It even is involved in issues related to presidential elections in different countries. So, because we are living in an increasingly globalized world, the penetration of international law into our daily lives is astonishing. And this means that its applications are enormous for students pursuing careers as diverse as some of the more typical ones would be working in international organizations, international trade, the State Department, the military, NGOs, especially international NGOs, but also in less obvious areas of legal practice, like law enforcement, taxation, banking, intellectual property, and entertainment, among others. So I hope I have the delight to actually engaging you in the study of international law. I hope to see you next semester. Bye-bye.